Welcome back, everybody. Great to see you on this Saturday out there. Hope we're all having a wonderful start to our weekend. In today's video, we are going to break down this big nor'easter that could potentially break records for a lot of folks here up the southeast coastline into the mid-Atlantic and eventually through the northeast. And then by the time we get into next week, we're going to round all this out with a big shot of cold air and some snow on the backside. So a very active time period ahead for a lot of Americans, and we're going to break all of that down region by region in today's video. Now, if you haven't already subscribed, definitely consider doing so. Make sure to hit that bell for the latest notifications, like the video if you like it, and comment. Let me know what you're seeing out there, where you're watching from, and kind of what you're expecting over the next couple of days as we break down the latest guidance that we have on this storm system. Now, I will also have a live stream out tonight at around 5 o'clock, so definitely make sure to come back for that this evening. I'll be answering all of your questions live and giving you, once again, the latest information that we have on the storm system as we continue to kind of analyze some of these changes throughout the day today. I think with that said, though, we can probably go ahead and jump right on into that forecast so we can kind of try to get through this in as much of a timely manner as possible. Now, starting off here, taking a look at our satellite imagery, you'll notice there's a lot going on right now compared to what we saw this time yesterday. We've got one kind of piece of spin, if you will, in the atmosphere over Missouri right now, and then another piece that is going to really be our more important factor over the middle of the Gulf of Mexico. Now, as we go through really throughout today and into tomorrow, this piece of energy is going to slowly work towards Florida, and this piece of energy is going to kind of phase a little bit with this southern piece, and all of that energy working together is going to likely allow for some record-breaking low pressure across sections of the southeast over the next 48 hours. So a very dynamic picture currently on our infrared satellite here, and it will only continue to look more and more interesting as we go throughout the next day or so. Alrighty, going ahead and moving this ahead into our radar imagery. Again, you'll notice the really bigger picture that we're seeing is that first piece of energy over Missouri right now. That is leading to a lot of rain as well as some snow falling here over sections of Minnesota and into the UP of Michigan, but kind of everywhere south of there. Most of this is just some good old-fashioned rain falling up and down the Mississippi River Valley from Louisiana up towards Arkansas, Mississippi, Tennessee, Kentucky, Missouri, and Illinois, getting in on a good amount of that rain throughout today. Now, I will mention over the rest of today, this will slowly continue to work off towards the east, but eventually kind of fizzling out for most folks over the Mississippi River Valley, and then that piece of energy is going to, again, kind of interact with our southern storm system, and that's when things are really going to get interesting along the east coast. Now, with that said, I am going to go ahead and give you a bit of the game plan for the rest of this video. So we're going to start by breaking this down region by region, starting with the southeast, working up into the mid-Atlantic, then into the northeast. We're going to talk about all the threats and all the timing there, and then we're going to kind of end the video talking about the snow chances on the backside of the storm system through sections of the Ohio River Valley, mid-Atlantic, and up into the northeast as well. So with that said, let's go ahead and get started here with our friends down in the southeast. Now, all of the threats that we're going to see down here are really beginning as early as now, but will continue to ramp up throughout the evening tonight, and that does include the threat for severe weather. Storm Prediction Center coming out with a slight risk through much of the Florida Peninsula today, from Tampa up towards Jacksonville, all the way down I-95 and I-75 towards Miami, back towards Naples, Fort Myers, and even down into the Keys, likely seeing severe weather today, including strong straight-line winds as well as some isolated tornadoes working on through this region of the country as well. So definitely have to make sure we have a way to get those watches and warnings through the state of Florida today, as we will likely see some tornadoes, and this threat unfortunately continues into the overnight tonight when those ingredients really begin to ramp up and we have a continued threat for those severe storms. Alrighty, let's go ahead and time out future radar for the southeast, and I'm mainly going to focus on Florida on this map. I'll talk more about Georgia and South Carolina and up into North Carolina as we get to the mid-Atlantic map, but most of this first section is going to be dedicated to Florida and some of these other surrounding areas. All right, so this afternoon you're going to notice the rain is going to pick up through much of Florida, starting kind of west to east here across the state, and likely some of that rain becoming heavy at times. We could also definitely see some breezy conditions throughout the day today, but I think it's going into tonight, especially after the sun goes down. That's when conditions will really begin to kind of go downhill for much of Florida. You'll notice plenty of these rain bands from this center of low pressure working inland, much like we see during tropical season. The only difference is this is not going to be a warm chord system. This is going to have fronts with it and is very much a mid-latitude cyclone. So one thing I want you to notice here in Florida is watch these kind of pockets of darker precipitation on your map. These are likely embedded supercells coming ashore, and that is what is going to bring some of that rotation inland and allow some of these tornado warnings to likely fire during the evening hours of today, as well as overnight and going into tomorrow morning. Now, if you're kind of up here in the panhandle of Florida, up into Alabama, much of Mississippi and Louisiana, really just a good old-fashioned rain today, and pretty cold rain at that too. Again, this is a nor'easter, so it's pulling in cold air on the back side of it. So it's going to be very important where you live on the map here in terms of what your impacts are. Now, continuing this into tonight, you'll notice that rain continues to pick up through Florida. And again, watch these little cells kind of come out of the Gulf and into the Florida Peninsula. Those are what we're going to have to watch for the chance of some rotation and some embedded tornadoes throughout the overnight hours tonight. And in fact, this is about midnight tonight. You'll notice this is when things are probably getting, I don't want to say to the worst point, but really starting to pick up in intensity with some of these storms coming off the Gulf and even out of the Atlantic as well. Now, if you're not put under a tornado warning tonight, if you're lucky enough to kind of avoid that, you still can't let your guard down. We're still going to have very heavy rainfall as well as very gusty winds throughout the overnight tonight. And by the time you're waking up tomorrow morning, this low pressure is finally working inland and still dealing with very breezy conditions as that is occurring. Now, the good news is, I think by the time we get into early tomorrow morning, the worst of these conditions will then kind of begin to work off towards the north and east, kind of back into the Atlantic Ocean, and eventually into the Carolinas and Georgia during the afternoon hours of tomorrow. And as I move this further ahead into time, we will still have to worry kind of a little bit tomorrow morning and during the early afternoon hours for some of these storms to continue to kind of work in off the Gulf on the backside, but that threat likely being more towards South Florida, I think, during tomorrow morning, while the rest of the state kind of clears out into the morning hours and into eventually the afternoon hours as the storm system, again, finally pushes up towards the Carolinas. And then by the time we're getting into Sunday afternoon, we'll have much nicer conditions through really the entire state of Florida as that drier, cooler air pushes in behind the storm system. All right, taking a look at wind gusts here down into this part of the country, you'll notice that we are going to see some breezy conditions for sure, especially going into overnight tonight and into tomorrow. Look at some of these wind gusts getting well into tropical storm strength through much of the peninsula and even potentially close to hurricane strength just off the coastline, especially on the Atlantic side of Florida there, back towards Jacksonville and Miami. Now, by the time we're waking up tomorrow morning, again, still very breezy conditions through much of the Florida Peninsula, and it's going to stay that way through much of the day tomorrow before things finally start to calm down as we get into Sunday afternoon and evening, and then most of those gusty winds push on up towards the Carolinas, and then we'll have a much nicer Monday in store for everyone kind of really just in the southeast as a whole. Looking at rainfall totals here, again, I think we could see 3 to 5 inches is a pretty likely bet through much of Florida, but isolated spots could get upwards towards half a foot of rainfall, not out of the question, especially where we kind of see some of that training of those thunderstorms that come off of the Gulf and the Atlantic, specifically kind of down here right into the heart of Florida, having the best shot, I think, at passing that 5-inch mark and getting closer to half a foot of rainfall. All right, let's move this up towards the mid-Atlantic a little bit now, talking about Georgia, the Carolinas, up into Virginia, and kind of surrounding areas. We will also have a severe weather threat for this part of the country tomorrow. In fact, Storm Prediction Center already outlining a slight risk of severe weather from kind of Charleston, South Carolina, up towards Myrtle Beach, back towards Florence, and even up towards Wilmington and the southern Outer Banks, including the Fayetteville area of North Carolina. We do also have a marginal risk surrounding that from Virginia Beach down towards Raleigh, out towards kind of Union County, North Carolina, down towards the Columbia Metro, and all the way again down into Florida, where we could see some back-end storms tomorrow afternoon, but really the morning hours down towards Florida. Now, this does include the chance of some tornadoes tomorrow. You'll notice two kind of different areas to watch: the Carolina coastline, as well as, again, southern Florida from Fort Myers back towards Miami and up towards kind of the Melbourne, Florida area as well. But the biggest threat tomorrow will once again be strong straight line winds up and down this area. And even outside of this, we could still see some strong winds throughout much of the day tomorrow. And we'll take a look at that map here in just a moment. Alrighty, let's kind of break this down now, timing it out for you. Right now, we're still dealing with pretty nice conditions through much of the mid-Atlantic. In fact, it's not really till this afternoon and going into this evening that conditions begin to go downhill a little bit. You'll notice especially seeing some of that plume of moisture getting in to portions of the western Carolinas, the upstate of South Carolina, out into northern Georgia, seeing some showers this afternoon and evening, and even showers continuing up into the Ohio River Valley throughout the day today, getting into Indiana, Kentucky, Ohio, and Tennessee. Luckily, out that way, really just a cold rain, not going to have to worry about the wind threat or the severe weather threat nearly as much as our friends further off towards the east. Now, it's once we kind of get into early tomorrow morning, by the time the sun's coming up, that's when things really begin to go downhill for much of the Carolinas. You'll notice this rain shield begins to work into the picture, bringing with it moderate to heavy rainfall at times throughout the day tomorrow. And here comes that center of low pressure by the time we get into tomorrow afternoon, likely somewhere over southern South Carolina or maybe just off the South Carolina coastline. Now, it's at this moment when things kind of really begin to go downhill for much of the Carolinas. Gusty winds taking over for most sections, especially in the central and eastern part of North and South Carolina, as well as that severe weather threat. Much like we're going to see in Florida, we'll have to watch these bands of rotating showers and storms coming in off the Atlantic, trying to work into the coastal plain of South Carolina and North Carolina. Could definitely prompt a couple tornado warnings tomorrow afternoon through that area. Now, going further into the day, that low pressure continues to work inland or again right up the coastline, and this is when wind will continue to pick up, the storm continuing to strengthen throughout the day, heavy rainfall intensifying through much of the North Carolina Piedmont and into the North Carolina Outer Banks. Now, one thing I will mention here is the placement of this low pressure is very important. Should this shift a little bit further westbound or eastbound, it's going to have big impacts on who sees the worst of the rainfall and the winds as well. Right now, if you're kind of watching from the Asheville area back towards Greenville, Spartanburg, into northern Georgia and eastern Tennessee, things look relatively calm compared to other places at least. Still definitely impactful, but not nearly as bad. Should the storm shift further off to the west, though, we'll have to watch for those impacts to increase out this way. And, same thing for places further east. Should the storm shift a little bit further east, we could see those winds shift with it as well. And that will definitely pay huge dividends in the overall impacts out of this storm system. All right, so moving this further ahead, going into kind of the overnight hours of Sunday into early Monday, things should begin to improve, at least in terms of rainfall through much of the Carolinas. Now, we will have to watch for some back-end wind threat really picking up here as that wind again continues to funnel into this low pressure on the backside. But in terms of rain and severe weather, that threat decreases overnight Sunday into early Monday. Now, continuing this into the overnight hours of Sunday, a lot of that rain now working up into the mid-Atlantic and northeast, bringing in very heavy rainfall, gusty winds. Luckily, severe weather threat looks a lot lower in this part of the country. I think once you get up into Virginia, Maryland, Pennsylvania, it's really going to be more of just a wind and rain threat and not so much a severe weather threat. So that is definitely some good news. Now, moving this further ahead into time, into about the time the sun is coming up on Monday morning, very widespread rainfall, including moderate to heavy rainfall through much of this part of the country during the early morning hours of Monday. But luckily, again, that severe weather threat looks to be mainly offshore, as most of these feeder bands, if you will, I know it's not a tropical storm, but still feeder band-like, kind of stay off the coast. So that is definitely good news for that part of the country. Now, in terms of wind and wind gusts here through the mid-Atlantic, still relatively nice today, although winds beginning to pick up this evening. though it's really going into the early morning hours of Sunday. Look at all of this very strong wind beginning to work up into the Carolinas during Sunday afternoon. And also, I want you to notice, look at how strong these winds are just offshore. These are going to be pushing inland, and we're likely going to have coastal flooding issues here through much of the Charleston area, up towards Myrtle Beach, into southeastern North Carolina, and even into parts of the Outer Banks, going to have, honestly, some storm surge-like impacts, much like we see during hurricane season when these storms ride up the coastline. Now, further inland, the wind will not be a joke either. Some of these gusts could get up to 40, 50 miles an hour as far inland as Columbia, up towards Charlotte, even up into the Greensboro and Raleigh area. Very gusty winds throughout the day Sunday and even into Sunday evening. And unfortunately, this is likely going to lead to a lot of power outages through much of the Carolinas, especially along the I-77 corridor and kind of eastbound here is where I think we'll see the worst of those power outage impacts. Those winds do continue to stay gusty throughout the evening hours of Sunday, luckily beginning to improve overnight Sunday into Monday for most folks. However, I will add, this is when the winds really pick up in the mountains. Look at some of these gusts getting up into that 60 to close to even 70 mile an hour range on those highest peaks, up and down the escarpment from North Carolina into Virginia and West Virginia, also dealing with very gusty winds into the early morning hours of Monday before things kind of calm down through the afternoon hours of Monday, and that's when the potential of maybe some wintry weather then takes over for portions of the mid-Atlantic, and we'll take a look at that here in just a moment. Rainfall totals for this part of the country, again, it's going to be a lot of rain, likely seeing widespread 3 to 5 inches of rain once again kind of along this I-77 corridor and eastbound up the coastline into Virginia, eastern North Carolina, and much of South Carolina. I will mention, again, we could very easily see half a foot of rainfall, especially down here into the coastal areas of South Carolina, where we'll see a lot of that heavy rainfall kind of stalling out over some of the same areas for a prolonged period of time. All right, moving this up into the northeast now and taking a look at impacts here. Again, today, really all quiet through this part of the country, and even much of our first half of Sunday staying relatively quiet. Now, going into the evening hours of Sunday and into the overnight, that's when things change. Look at this plume of moisture working its way up out of the south, and again seeing widespread rainfall with isolated spots of moderate to heavy rainfall mixing in there, and once again very windy conditions, especially along the coastline here from New Jersey up into Long Island, Connecticut, Rhode Island, and Massachusetts, seeing those very gusty winds moving on through. Now, this is not really your average nor'easter in the Northeast. Oftentimes, we are talking about snowfall here. Unfortunately for you snow lovers, this is going to be an all-rain event, at least on the front side. Again, the backside, we could see some snow work in, but really, most of the duration of this event is going to just be very rainy, very windy throughout the day Monday, and even into the evening hours of Monday before here comes that block of snow on the backside. That could really, bring quite the transition from very heavy rainfall to, honestly, snow squalls moving on through by the time we get into the evening hours of Monday and overnight into Tuesday. All right, taking a look at wind gusts here in the Northeast. Again, pretty quiet today. It's going into Sunday that those gusts begin to pick up a little bit. Here, you'll notice this is Sunday afternoon. Some pretty strong winds coming off the Great Lakes, but nothing, let me change the color so you can see it a little bit better. Nothing too out of the ordinary. It's going into overnight Sunday, though, and into Monday here that you'll notice. That's when things kind of begin to really go downhill. This is very early into Monday morning, very gusty winds, again coming off the Atlantic here into sections of the Delmarva up into eastern Pennsylvania there, into Philadelphia, into southern New Jersey, the entire state of Delaware, through Long Island, and eventually into Connecticut, Rhode Island, and Massachusetts, getting in on very gusty winds, well in excess of tropical storm strength, and even close to hurricane strength here along the immediate shorelines through Long Island, Connecticut, Rhode Island, and up into the Cape, again seeing very gusty wind conditions. And that continues throughout the day Monday, moving off up towards the north and east into Maine, seeing those very gusty winds and into surrounding areas before likely calming down overnight Monday and into our Tuesday. All right, rainfall totals here through this part of the country. Again, much like our friends to the south, although I think a little bit less, maybe more of 2 to 4 inches compared to 3 to 5 inches here through much of the I-95 corridor, where we'll see a little bit more rain further down towards the Carolinas, where I think we just have more of a bigger rain shield. Here, it'll be a little more scattered in nature, which is definitely some good news. And it won't be, quite as constant with the heavy rainfall. So again, rainfall totals a little bit lower here in the Northeast compared to the Mid-Atlantic and down into Florida. Alrighty, so that's kind of the immediate impacts of this storm system itself. I know a lot of you are probably curious about the snow impacts on the backside, so let's go ahead and dive into that really quickly here and move our map ahead in time. All right, so this is our big storm system itself. This is kind of into, again, the middle of the night Sunday. You'll notice we're working up the coastline like we just looked at. And what I want you to kind of look at on the backside is look at these very pronounced isobars that are showing very strong signs of troughing here back towards the Midwest. And what I mean by that, again, I talk about this all the time, just kind of the kinking here in these lines. They're not straight lines, they're kind of bent downwards. And what that often indicates is an injection of cold air and energy aloft in the atmosphere. And sure enough, that's what we're going to get here going into the day Monday. So here comes those isobars. They come crashing down, and by the time we're in Monday afternoon, we've got widespread snow showers breaking out through the Midwest into the Ohio River Valley. Seeing some of those snow showers, and even as far south as the escarpment of North Carolina, potentially getting in on some of these snow showers throughout the day Monday. This is into the evening hours. Again, very pronounced area of snowfall, and even by the time we're waking up Tuesday, still dealing with these snow showers through much of the Mid-Atlantic and Northeast, and as well as some very cold air. Again, this is a very impressive shot of some cooler air working in through much of the East Coast throughout the day Monday and into our Tuesday, before then finally it pulls out and we get back to normal going into the second half of next week. Now, how much snow are we talking? Well, the first thing we should look at is what are the chances of the snow falling at all. Our latest Euro Ensemble members taking a look at the probability of at least an inch of snow falling. Well, you'll notice here it's pretty high going into overnight Monday and into Tuesday. This is getting well past 50% chance of that criteria being met through much of the Ohio River Valley, into the higher elevations of Appalachia, from North Carolina up through the Virginias, and even into Pennsylvania, New York State, and into other sections of the Northeast going into Tuesday and Tuesday evening, before again things clear out going into the middle of next week and into our Christmas weekend. All right, let's take a look at some snowfall totals as a whole here, and we'll start here off into portions of the Midwest. I will mention a lot of this will be kind of dependent on, the wind pattern. Should the wind shift a little bit, a lot of this lake effect snow is going to move with it. But as of right now, the best chance of seeing some pretty big accumulation likely here along the western shores of Michigan into northern Indiana. Could see a couple inches of snow out of this for sure. And even up into the UP of Michigan, seeing some snow showers out of this as well going into that Monday timeframe. Now, taking a look at the Mid-Atlantic, again, the best chance of seeing snow through here is going to be in the highest peaks of North Carolina up into West Virginia, where 3 to 5 inches of snow not out of the question at all. But you'll also notice with those snow showers, we could get a quick dusting to upwards of an inch through sections of eastern Kentucky, eastern Tennessee, through much of the state of Ohio as well. Before those people kind of up along the lake shores themselves, likely getting more snow. Again, 1 to 3 inches of snow more likely up in those regions. Now, moving this up into the Northeast a little bit here, again, a lot of lake effect things are going to be dependent on the snowfall forecast. So if you're right along the lakes, again, 1 to 3 isolated spots of 3 to 5 inches of snow look more likely compared to areas further east where a dusting to upwards of an inch out of some scattered snow showers is a bit of a more likely scenario. So definitely watching that as we go into the second half of this storm system. Alrighty, a lot of information in this video, and again, this one wasn't quite as in-depth as yesterday's video, but as I said earlier, I will be having another live stream out this evening, so definitely make sure to come back for that, and I'll be able to answer any questions that maybe I didn't in this video, and also go at a bit of a slower pace. I know this was very fast-paced with a lot of information, but just kind of had to get it all out there here within a timely manner. With that said, though, again, hope you have a great rest of your Saturday out there, and I will see you all later tonight.